Today we have the incredible and awe-inspiring Samantha Naple with us, and she is an amazing writer and one that I trust to even edit my books that I've written. She just inspires so much hope and creativity and is such an encourager and a blessing wherever she goes. So we are here to talk to her today about how do we write with God. Let's talk about it, you guys. Welcome to Celebration State, where we help Christian creatives grow in their creativity and, most importantly, in their love for God. We are so excited to have Samantha Naple with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So tell us all, when did you get started writing?
Oh man, I was very little when I first started writing. Not about God, because I didn't really have a relationship with him yet at that point, but when I was in third grade, I think is when I really knew, like, I want to write. I love writing. I loved words. Loving to read was a huge impact, on wanting to write. In third grade, I wrote a little screenplay. It was part of a project for school, and that's when I knew, like, I love writing. I love character development. I love story development, all of that. And that has been the way that I, feel like I connect with God the most in writing is through poetry. And so I think high school and on is when that part of my writing really took off. So I started blogs and journals and even submitted to some different publications and just kind of went from there.
Wow. So even now today, would you say that poetry is your preferred genre?
It is. I think poetry comes most easily to me, and that may be because you can do so much weird stuff with it, and you can say what you're trying to say in fewer words and in more images. Like when I'm writing poetry, I like to try and paint a picture. So I use a lot of sometimes weird adjectives, or I want to make it very vivid so that people feel like they're actually immersed in some kind of experience with God or in whatever the speaker of the poem, whatever's happening in there. I want it to be very bright and vivid of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So how would you describe the process of writing with God? What does that look like for you?
It looks a little bit different depending on my goal. If I'm trying to write a bigger piece, let's say it has many parts, or it's something that I know is going to have more of maybe an impact, I use more, I guess, what people would call grit, and just like, I've just got to sit down and get this done. And so sometimes that looks like me sitting down and making an actual schedule where I say, like, every Tuesday I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write for 30 minutes, or every day I'm going to write for 15 minutes, I'm just going to chip away at this thing. But sometimes, and these are my favorite times, when it feels like less of a process and it just feels like more of a flow, is usually in worship. So if I'm in worship at church, or at like a worship night, or, we're doing worship here, a lot of times my worship can be expressed in writing. And I used to think that was weird. I used to think, oh no, that's blasphemous, or like, I'm supposed to be like standing and singing, or like laying down and just, receiving God's Spirit, his presence. And over time, he showed me that's okay. It's okay to pick up your journal and to write about me, or to write about whatever is going on in your mind or whatever is going on in your heart. And so a lot of my poetry has actually come from those moments of worship, or my writing in general has come from worship time specifically.
Wow. So when you are listening for the voice of God to direct your writing, what does that sound like to you? What is that? Or does it feel like something? Or how do you let yourself be guided by God in that process?
That's really good. In those moments of worship, that's probably when it feels the easiest, when it feels the clearest. When I'm just sitting there and I have my journal and I'm just writing, it's more like a conversation with God at that point. It's more like writing a love letter to God a lot of times. But when it's more of a bigger project, when I feel that God has given me, like, there's this thing, there's this idea that I've given to you, and he wants me to do something more with it, more like I was talking about with a piece, like that's in many parts, or he's even told me, it may be time to write a book pretty soon. I'll just put that out there. Oh,
that's
gosh.
exciting. Can't wait for that.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with that, but that would be something that's more like a process and more, scheduled. But in both, whether it's in worship or it's putting your head down and doing the work, when I'm listening for God in those moments of writing, it feels less like I'm hearing him and more like I'm just with him. And there's like an acceptance in that. Like you can just sort of feel, and I'm not a really feely person, so that's kind of how I know that God is in that process.
Because it's so like not you.
Yeah, because it's not just something that I'm contriving, or my go-to to get something done is to create a checklist and go. And there is an element of that sometimes, but there's just this steady guidance of like, okay, we're doing, and it's just one little thing at a time. It's not always let me sit and figure out the entire piece or figure out where I'm going with this. Sometimes it's just let's take one little verse at a time or one phrase at a time. And there's just this sense of yes, that's the next part. Yes, that's it. And sometimes I'll try to force it, or if I try to push it, you can kind of tell. I don't know if you experience this in your art, but you can kind of tell when you're trying to make it happen, and you'll go back and reread, and it's like, nope, that wasn't how it's supposed to be. So proofreading is super important too, but God is even in the proofreading process. Like, we did this together, and now we're going to shift it a little. Now we're going to adjust. So.
Wow. So if you could give one word of advice for someone who's just getting started with writing and trying to hear God's voice in that whole process, what would you give?
Find a really good pen. I know it sounds silly, but find
the things that really matter, you guys.
They do. So. And that could be that may actually be more of like a figurative statement, because maybe you're someone who likes to type. I do both. I like to handwrite. I like to type stuff out. But find a good space. Find a good medium for that writing. So if that's getting a really nice journal with like big pages, or getting a really nice pen that just flows, or figuring out if you like Microsoft Word or Notepad or a blog, like find that really good canvas and experiment with that. The other suggestion I would have would be to take a little bit of time every single day to devote to just practicing. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece or a mind-blowing psalm or anything like that every single time that you write, but the consistency and the steadiness is where more of that's going to flow. So I would say, get a really good pen and give yourself even like 5 minutes a day. Yeah. Before you go to bed or when you first wake up, just write.
That was so good. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're incredible.
Thank you.
We are so thankful that we've been able to have Samantha with us today, and hopefully we'll be able to have her back for part 2 sometime soon. And down below I'm going to link to her socials, and I'm going to link to her blog so you can see the things that she's doing and keep up with her, because she is incredible. Comment down below also if you guys have any questions about this whole process. We would be more than happy to help you. That is why we made this channel, is to help you grow, because not everybody in the world, unfortunately, is surrounded by a group of Christian creatives that are going to empower and support. And so we want to be there for you in any way that we can. And we believe that this message is important, that God is doing something in this right now in the world. So if you can like and subscribe and also turn on the notifications, that's going to not only help you come on the journey with us, but it's also going to help us get this message out all over the world to the people that really need it and could benefit from it right now. So thank you so much for watching, you guys, and be so blessed.